We are two womanist race nerds talking shit over tea, dismantling white supremacist patriarchal capitalism one episode at a time. I'm Queen.
I'm Jay.
And this is Tea with Queen and Jay. Ow.
Wagwan, everybody. This is Donovan, and welcome to another special episode of Stranger Fruit. I have two very, very, very special and familiar voices and faces on this episode. We have Queen and Jay from Tea with Queen and Jay, our favorite womanist race nerds combating white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, one conversation at a time. Ew. First of all, that was a mouthful, but I want y'all to know that I hear y'all all the time. You're not there. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to put it like this. You know Sunny from The View? Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
She says this all the time. Now, I don't know where she got it from. I don't know. It was probably Bell Hooks.
Yeah.
But one thing about it, though, that I'd like to say is that before I met y'all, I didn't hear it a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, we heard about white supremacy. We obviously know about capitalism, obviously know about a patriarchy. But the way y'all just hit it back to back, boom, 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 boom.
That's how I be hitting us back to back.
That's why you be so tired.
Exactly. Like, I remember, I'll never forget it when y'all came to the Grapevine ready to go. Big hair, big personality, big attitude, and a lot to say, and just hitting it like that. It was such a breath of fresh air after having so many conversations about the white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic structure that we live in. Yeah. And y'all were so impactful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, and for people who may not know y'all who are watching this, I have to ask this because normally y'all know this is a very special episode because it's very, very intimate. And I love these conversations because we get to learn a little bit more about y'all. We talk a lot about, you know, what's going on in society, but I want to talk about y'all for a quick second.
Yikes.
Just a quick second. Because the work that you all do, identifying as womanists, first of all, which is something that I didn't even hear until very recently, over the last couple of years, largely because of y'all. And then adding the race nerd part of it. And adding all of these elements to it. Like, we've been going through a really cool kind of evolution at this point in our lives. Like, we saw the birth of something like Insecure, where like this identity of Black women being awkward or being nerds or being able to center conversation outside of like the typical gaze, which is about what relationships, which is about like what rap or like pop culture and things like that. And even with the Grapevine, getting into conversations about colorism, it's like you wonder, like, well, goddamn, how long are we going to have these conversations? And y'all really brought fresh air to those conversations. Why do you do it? How did you get here? What the fuck?
Well, my mom and dad.
Same.
Yeah.
We didn't grow up together, but we grew up very similarly, where it was like these parents who wanted us to be blacker than black and blacker than black. And like,
come on, parents.
Kind of made sure that regardless of anything that we loved being Black.
Yeah.
So those foundational pieces for me and her is just really similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we both grew up with race theory. And I think a lot of people don't when we talk to a lot of, and it's not something that I knew. I didn't know that like
that's what
everybody's house
Right.
wasn't talking about race theory and racism and like dissecting all of those isms. And I think both of us having the foundation that we had in our homes of talking about Blackness and race theory, that knowledge that we had and understanding that oppression helped us to understand our own oppression as Black women and as we experience it as at the different intersections of gender identity and queerness and all those different things that play a role into the way that we experience the world.
Do you think like your parents would ever guess that you would be out here in these streets on camera, having your own podcast, kind of continuing that legacy of specifically going in and talking about these issues? Because I'm pretty sure they got you involved for the process of survival and just so that you can know who you are in this place, but to continue. Obviously, we grown now. Like, do they feel any way about that? Would they ever have guessed?
I could see my parents, like, it all makes sense. Like,
my mom is like, just be careful, baby. Man, no, why you have to do this? I'm so serious. They're like,
it makes sense, but also my parents in particular, they both were in the Nation of Islam back in the day, so they already had a push against the system kind of foundation. Like, we weren't, I realize it now. I didn't know what was happening when I was a kid, but it was very like, you don't need to assimilate. You're fine like this. You can be like this. You can like whatever. But in the moment, it was like, I guess they just okay I guess they're okay with us being ghetto. You know, like, I didn't know. I didn't, you know, like, as a kid, I'm like, okay, well, my parents say it's fine that I talk like this or act like this or whatever. But now I realize it's because for them, it was like, you're never going to be enough, in quotations. So be yourself. But I didn't know what they was doing. So now I'm looking back like, oh, so you did know how to raise me. You know, yeah.
I don't think that my parents expected me to get intersectional with the shit. You know what I'm saying? Because we grew up talking about blackness. We didn't grow up talking about my identity as a woman or femme-presenting person. We didn't grow up talking about any kind of gender identity, anything outside of black and white. We didn't really discuss it. And you know, I have the privilege of being from New York, and identities in New York, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of depth. True. So there came knowledge with that. But when my dad was teaching me about being a black person, he did not expect me to also take that information and wonder why my upbringing was also so patriarchal. They didn't, neither of my parents, Queen grew up with a certain freedom of being her whole black self and not growing up with respectability. I grew up pro-black, but also very respectable on different ranges of respectability. My dad being, his parents are Jamaican immigrants. So you know the respectability that can come with that. Right. What? The respectability that comes with that. You know, my mom, diasporic in her own way, but a lower level of respectability, but still respectability politics. So I don't think that either of them expected me to get intersectional with the shit, and I think that that's a part of, we can curse here, right?
Oh, yes, please.
This is new.
Fuck it up.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, everything has gotten more intersectional. So I don't think it's just, you know, me, them kind of thing. I think it's just the world.
That's true.
The conversations in the world have opened up to more intersectionality, and that's a more common conversation than it was back then. So I think that they always expected me to speak up, but I don't think
they know what you was going to say.
Yes, they know what I was going to say. My dad was outraged.
They going in.
It's like, you're saying what?
My mom too.
Right.
My mom is like, let me ask you a question. I was watching the show, but do you have to curse as much? Like, do you have to say that thing? Even to this day, my mom is like, you can't go to Jamaica. She's like, you're not allowed to go. And I'm like, why not? And she's like, because God forbid somebody knows who you are, or if they happen to, you know, anything, and it just makes you a target. Because that intersectionality that you're talking about, my parents, both Jamaican immigrants, same thing. You know, there was a certain level of respectability there for sure. Actually, an astronomical level of.
It's more.
Yes.
It's just more. There's an added, when you're talking about black immigrants, it's an added level of respectability. And there's also, no matter how pro-black you try and be as an immigrant here, there is that level of, we don't want you to be like those niggas. So my dad grew up being a pro-black person, you know, in the Bronx, in the US, but also while he was trying to be pro-black everywhere else, his parents are like, we still don't want you to be like those niggas.
Exactly.
And not that they would ever necessarily say it that way.
That's what we understood.
That's what it was.
My mom used to say, I don't know if y'all know about the Brooklyn streets back in the day, but there's a school called, there was a school called Thomas Jefferson. I don't know if it's still there. But, oh, you know Thomas Jefferson? Yo, Jay, our engineer right now is like, yo, I know Thomas Jefferson and South Shore and all of these schools. And my mom would say, let me tell you something. You have to go to school and you have to work. And if you don't, you're going to go to Thomas Jefferson and then I got nyam me raw. I was like, nyam me raw? oh my God, like this is, because she knew that if you go into, because she knows how the system is set up. And I think as immigrants, first of all, you're thinking about like, yo, they might kick me out of this joint at any moment in time.
Right.
Stay your ass out of trouble. Don't get in no trouble. Don't bring any attention to us. But there's this other element of just like, I think for them, understanding like there's a certain level of privilege that you have being born here, and we want you to be safe. And it gets into the assimilation. It gets into the respectability-ness of it. So for me, I really did absorb a lot of that. What I think my parents did that was unique, that I think to some of our other, like, you know, first generation counterparts, is that my mother was very like, you got to know everything to know that I could possibly educate you on the African American experience so that you don't get this shit twisted. Right. So my mother was, she was a Jamaican woman wearing dashikis talking about Martin Luther King. I don't know how else to describe it. She was just very like steeped into the Black experience, because I think she kind of got to have like, she came in when she was 12. So she got like a little bit more of the experience by the time that she had me at 24.
Yeah.
So I was like, that nuance is dope. But now to see what I'm doing now, she couldn't have anticipated that joint, because they still grew up homophobic as fuck, still raised me homophobic as fuck. Like one of my cousins who is a trans woman, I didn't speak to her for like 15 years because she was ostracized from the family, right? So it's like we grew up with a lot of foolishness, but with like these moments. And I held on to those moments and had to undo all the other stuff.
Definitely. When you mentioned her threatening you with going down to that high school or whatever, right? I went to Truman, which was the school at the time, it was a lot of violence when I was there. But instead of the threat is like, okay, yeah, you're in the hood, but you're not of the hood. Which is a respectable, which for even as a Black American person or whatever, is still this kind of separation and this kind of instilling respectability in this girl that's, in the hood, quote unquote. I grew up in co-op, call it what you want. But like this girl who's growing up in a certain environment saying, okay, well, you're better. Make sure that you hold yourself better and carry yourself better. And you're not, don't be like those other Negroes.
For sure.
So there's, this element of like respectability that I think a lot of us have worked very hard to shed and dismantle as we understood intersectionality and privilege and all the nuances that go beyond just race theory and Blackness.
Absolutely. That makes me come to this point, because through your perspective, through your upbringing, and then dismantling all of those things. And you have to listen to Tea with Queen and Jay, because they go hard, y'all. Like they go really, really hard. And one of the things that I really like is those moments. You've done it on the grapevine, but I like those moments of even self-reflective. Let me check myself real fast. Let me question myself a little bit. And I think like that's a part of the awkward part, even with our parents. Yeah. And that's like been some of the struggling points. When I was around 23, I ran away. I ran away right to brother's house. I ran right away to his apartment until I got on his nerves. I was there so long because I ran away because I came to a crossroads of just knowing like, I love myself. I'm honoring that. And certain things that y'all are saying, like I cannot fuck with it. And I needed to find a way to break through. And it just became like another leg of the journey in dismantling and building myself. Yeah. It was before I ever stepped foot on anybody's stage to talk about anything related to race or queerness. It was just like what I felt in my body. And so for you, like Queen, especially like, being in having your perspective, and I don't want to tell all your business, but identifying also as a queer person, bi, having all of these intersections, dark skin, these intersections. Did you find that in your upbringing, was that addressed? Were those moments addressed?
Queerness, definitely not. I think that all Black people just have this queer erasure where like you said, your trans family member, where you just forget that they
don't exist.
And I remember having a conversation with my mom as an adult. She's knowing I'm a queer person or whatever. And I'm like, Ma, it makes no sense that like the queer people are like my generation. Like where's the gay people?
like this ain't adding up.
Like this don't make no sense that me, my nephew, I have a few cousins who are out. It makes no sense that we're the only out people. Yeah. And his whole family. So then my mother starts talking about like members who I never met. And it's just like,
Yep.
like, oh, really? So, so it is, I like that I'm able to have these conversations with my mother and for her to realize like, okay, that was fucked up. But that's all they knew what to do is kind of discard these people because you are not being the perfect black.
Yes.
Essentially, you know. So that was kind of it was nice that I was able to have that conversation, but it's also like bittersweet because who are these queer elders that I never got to experience?
Oh my God.
Because of
Erasure.
that erasure, you know. We've talked about that, and it's just like it's because we are still trying to, even when you know all of this stuff about blackness or whatever, even with parents who were like that, there was still so much that they were missing because of no intersectionality in that, you know. So
exactly.
So that never was addressed. I'm one of those odd people who didn't really meet colorism until I went outside. Could be because my mom is dark skinned, like darker than me, dark skin.
Right.
And me and my siblings, we are many different colors. So I have light skinned family members, dark, you know, whatever.
Right.
So in my house, it wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't a thing.
I know that peace. It sounds like you had a little bit of peace at home.
Yeah, it was like, I didn't start to notice colorism until it started to be about desirability and whether someone is attracted to this person or not. That's when I first started like, wait, what? Because huh? Like, because she's what? Like, it was just, that's like middle school when you start like.
Yes.
It's like, wait,
oh,
what?
so still fairly young, but definitely out the house.
Yeah,
Got
out
it.
of my house. Like, in my home, it did not happen, and I appreciate that. And I don't know if it's because my mom is a dark-skinned person or not.
Yeah.
But it wasn't there. We didn't make jokes about skin color. Like, we just didn't do that stuff in my house. So, yeah, I didn't. And then because of my family, we were even when we watched, we were only really allowed to watch black shows. And
Right.
so there was so much of me just being like in this cocoon of like protection. Yeah. Just like, you know, whatever. Then I went outside, I'm like, damn, y'all niggas is wilding.
Yeah. Like, because it's like, whoa.
What are y'all doing?
What are y'all doing? Like, and that's fortification. They kind of like fortified you, gave you like a nice little foundation.
Yes.
So you were able to recognize that they were wilding as opposed to like taking it on. Did you ever take it on?
Not really. So like the times when I can think about internalized colorism, because colorism is something that dark-skinned people can also perpetuate, just like black people can perpetuate anti-blackness.
Absolutely.
So it's not something unique.
Yeah.
Some people think it's unique that a dark-skinned person can participate in these systems, and it's like, it's not that special.
No, we can do it, and we do it well too.
You know, but it wasn't until when it came to that desirability stuff when I started noticing maybe a guy being more into my friends because they're lighter skinned, and then, you know, just stuff like that. That for me, I think because of those foundational pieces, didn't really affect my self-esteem in ways that it probably affect other dark-skinned women. Yeah. And then also there are women who are darker than me, so their colorism experiences may be way different from mine because there are folks darker than me. Like, I've never been called midnight.
Yeah.
You know, I've never, you know, like, because I am on the lighter spectrum of dark-skinnedness.
Yeah.
So I've never really had a lot of those deep colorist experience, but it's not until I like got into the world. So when I'm trying to date or when I'm noticing that, and I didn't notice this until I was an adult, but I'm noticing that I'm being treated differently. Like, everyone always thinks that I am doing something wrong. Like, I look back at schooling and it's like, teachers are always suspicious of me when I'm dead ass not doing, you know, so I'm realizing like, oh, that was colorism existing, but I didn't know why. I just thought that they just thought I had an attitude. You know, I didn't know what it was, but I'm being treated poorly or being treated suspiciously, or like, you're not expecting me to, I was like a very smart kid. You're not expecting me to like know the things I know. So, and it's like, I couldn't identify it because I was black. It was because I was a girl. It was because I'm Muslim. Like, I had so many intersections that I couldn't really pinpoint what it was. But I'm looking back now, and a lot of that was colorism because the expectation of me was to be less than, regardless of what. So like, for me to even have the audacity to demand respect was like, girl, shut your mouth. Like, that's not
How dare you?
Yeah, and it was just like, but I didn't know that that's what that was until I was an adult and I learned more about the systems of colorism. Because usually when we talk about colorism, we keep it on a basic level of desirability, where colorism is a system that oppresses dark-skinned people. Yes. And when I started to research and look into the system of colorism, I'm like, they've been fucking with me all this time.
The whole time.
The whole time.
And I think what you said is really, really, really an important part about where it starts and how it can start. Like a lot of people, I'm sure it started at home. Mm-hmm. Thank God that you had like a foundation where you weren't set out that way. But once you met it, you know, just like how early it starts. And then how, you know, even in processing, like, well, what did I do? Like, what is that? Like, what does that do to a kid? You know what I'm saying? And then the stats behind that about being more likely to be suspended, more likely to be expelled, more likely to get in fights, more likely to have to go to night school because you were not able to be successful in day school.
There were times where I've had fights that were not my fault.
Wow.
I'm the darkest skinned person, and it's like, it's because of her. And it's like, she... And I did not equate that. I did not know that's what that was as a kid. I did not know that's what that was when I was a young woman. So I couldn't address it or combat it in that way because I didn't even know what it was. But that's exactly, like when I look back, I'm like, yo, just because I'm dark, I was the problem. Mm-hmm. And I was not supposed to exist. And I exist very loudly. Mm-hmm. Like,
and we love it.
But I'm like, wow, they was really trying to stomp that out of me.
That's so crazy. And that's also a part of like what I love about the journey is because now, look at you. You're on a mic, like talking about this shit all the time. You can't stop. You can't stop the train. You can't stop the party. But what about you, Jay? Like in that same kind of like vein, because I will speak, you know, about the Jamaican experience. I knew about colorism at home first. Mm-hmm. Not my mom, not my dad, but within the family. Right? Like, for example, I have an uncle who would say, like, when I was out in the sun for a certain long time, he'd be like, yo, you got to stay out the sun. You're getting too dark. He's this color. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, why would that even be an issue? Listen, I never, in my young mind, maybe 11, I never had thought about being out in the sun and getting too dark. We want to get dark. This is a part of what happens every single summer. Yeah. And I remember him, and you see, it never left my mind that time. And an aunt of mine was in the room because I pushed back on that. And my aunt said, you know, I always thought I would get married to a man with soft hair and curly hair and light skin. No, I'm sorry, not light skin, because Jamaicans say brown skin. and I just remember that. I never forget that conversation. Just one of those things that I'll never forget. So I saw that there was desirability politics. When you talk about the system of colorism, that's the leg of it that I saw. So it wasn't people getting expelled or suspended or getting to fights. I wasn't able to make that link, but I did see the desirability part. What about you, Jay? Did you see anything? Did you hear anything at home, or did it, or like Queen, was it at school?
As a part of the race theory that I grew up with, we did talk about colorism. So I was raised, my dad is very light-skinned. Both of his parents, now that it's 2023, and we're talking about who's black and who's not. Mm-hmm. Don't tell my dad. But don't tell who he is. Okay. My father's father is biracial, white and black, and his mother, I would refer to her as multiracial, right? So I would say due to the time, due to the conversations that were being had, both of them, my grandparents consider themselves to be black people. Right. In terms of their privilege, they very clearly had light-skin privilege. In a room with only white people, I'm sure my grandmother passed to some people. So that was that experience. And my mother is brown skin. So I would say light skin, but like the brownest light skin perhaps. And her family, her siblings, all shades of, to me at least when I look at them, they're all shades of from darker skin to light skin. Yes.
All the shades.
Yes,
you know how black people do.
Yeah, right, they're all the shades. Her mother is from Baltimore by way of North Carolina. And so I would say with my dad's family being so specifically light, and with my mom having the experience of coming through, you know, my grandmother being from the South and things like that, and wanting to, as I said, both of my parents being so pro-black, you cannot not have the conversation about colorism with the experience of being so, you know, my dad being so light-skinned and my mom having cousins and family and siblings of every shade. So we did talk about colorism, but it was reduced to, or limited, rather, I'll say, limited to the experience of, I know my grandmother had a first cousin who experienced colorism in her home and was like, okay, well, they're not talking to that cousin because she's the darker cousin and this, that, or whatever. And so it was always my grandmother's intention to teach her kids about that kind of colorism, and we don't do that here, whatever. So I grew up with the knowledge that I could be treated better because I'm light-skinned and that it's not okay to do that. And so the base level knowledge that colorism exists, lighter skinned people are sometimes treated better because people think they're better to look at. People like having them around more, and we don't do that here. So it's not something that I grew up with in my home. It's not something, in terms of the experience of colorism, I wasn't ever in my home treated like, okay, well, you know, you're light skinned. Me and all my siblings, we're similar. We're similar in complexion.
Okay.
My sister's hair was a little bit straighter than mine, and more people thought that she was, you know, rosier complected. I'm a little bit more yellow, whatever. But I say that to say, no one in my home was like, oh, she has better hair than you, whatever. So I didn't really grow up with that. Yeah. But I understood, because my parents were so pro-Black, I understood that there was, I don't want to use the term system for a reason, and I'll say that in a second. But I understood that there was, again, the base level of desirability and who gets treated better in these kind of one-on-one instances. What I didn't understand was the system of it, and was how it impacts. I understood that my grandparents were able to acquire things that they had and allowed in places because of how they looked. I understood that, but I never made the connection, and it also was not made for me, that this is a systemic thing that is happening to everyone, right? So it's not just that, your dark-skinned friends may be treated differently. It's and even when I say that, it's clearly a systemic issue. Yeah. But it wasn't a connection that I ever made or that I was ever taught to make.
That makes a lot of sense.
Most people don't make that connection, though.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, no, not at all.
And you brought up a really great point when you mentioned that you are like a lighter version of the dark skin. Yeah. Because there's a whole range of people who are in the middle.
That's the thing. People think of colorism as a binary. Like,
yes.
Like the lightest of the lights are the only light skins, and then like dark people, and it's like, Black people look like so
many, every shade. Ask Rihanna, it's every shade. Like
so many different things, and I kind of wish people there's nuance to colorism as well that I think people just don't really get, because really people keep the conversations with colorism about desirability and keep it about light-skinned girls when it's like, George Floyd was murdered because he was a dark-skinned Black man. God. You know?
Yes.
But we want to keep the conversation about this girl being light-skinned in the club. And I'm hating on that too. But there's like...
plenty of big fish to fry.
Yeah, there's like a whole system of like dark-skinned people who are harmed.
Yeah.
And there's the numbers that show that. Like, let's think about how many Black men we march for that were light-skinned.
Yeah.
We don't got to think that long, because you know what I mean? That's colorism.
Yes.
That's not just anti-Blackness.
Yes, and it really, really matters. And in true professionalism, you know, Queen brings up the next part of the conversation because that's how they do. I'm telling you, listen to the podcast. But to that point, I want to fast forward. I want to fast forward to 2020. I want to fast forward to George Floyd in particular, because we all know, a lot of us got those phone calls from folks who want us to talk about all the shit that we've been talking about for years that are highly around colorism. And we're going to get more into that, but I specifically want to get into this point and period where everybody was outside marching after George Floyd was executed in the middle of the street with a kneecap on his neck by a white man, right? Everybody was out. Asian folks, white folks, Black folks, all of the races. And I was like really inspired by that. I was like, this is really dope. I also was very like, skeptical, like what the fuck is going on here? What does this mean? How long is this gonna last? But the colorism thing immediately came up for me too. I was like, look at this dark-skinned man on the floor with this white man's kneecap. I mean, like, it's just forever burned into a lot of our brains. But as I look around and I think about all those people who coalesce, I'm thinking about all of the people who have died. I'm thinking about Sandra Bland, who was also, a brown woman, dark brown to certain people, who was also murdered. I can think about Philando Castile. Like we can name all of them.
A lot of them are dark.
Yes, even beginning with Trayvon's brother in 2013. Excuse me, Trayvon Martin, because I know his brother, and his brother's also a dark-skinned black man. And I'm thinking about like
dark-skinned also.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just thinking about like, what happens when, like, how do you take that trauma as you walk down the street in the body of a dark-skinned black person? That was extra highlighted for me at that time. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit more. Now we're in 2023. The conversation still continues. We're still talking about colorism like we haven't been talking about it year after year after year after year. And I had a conversation recently on Stranger Fruit. We got into the colorism conversation. And I will tell you like this, what I've noticed is that we're on the social media, people won't chime into certain conversations as much. But baby, when you talk about colorism, people feel the need to get up, put on their pajamas, get some coffee on, sip it for the caffeine injection, just to tell you that colorism is not real. People get up so early to come back. Why is it, with all of the examples, with George Floyd, with the statistics about dark-skinned black women, in particular, Serena Williams, people not believing having labor.
Those numbers, those statistics and those numbers that are usually talking about black death, women who die in childbirth, who's poor, usually the numbers align with dark-skinned people.
Yeah.
But when you look at media, what represents black people is always light-skinned people. So if it's systemic. It's basically the point I'm trying to make.
It's the illest erasure of all time.
Yes, and I get upset because, yes, anti-blackness exists. I would never deny that. But I think that a lot of times the anti-black conversation does erase the colorist conversation because it's like, we all black. And it's like, there's a specific black person that is generally more harmed and that is darker skinned people. So I think or sometimes when I'll see conversation about misogynoir and like they'll mix it up with colorism. Like I saw someone online was talking about Megan experienced colorism. I'm like, no, she didn't. She experienced misogynoir. Those are very different things.
Yeah.
That's something only a dark-skinned black woman can experience, misogynoir and colorism. Right. But I think a lot of times people just don't know what words mean.
Yeah.
And they just be throwing them around and putting them on things. And it's like, no, like there are black women who experience misogynoir and colorism.
Yeah.
Not every black woman experiences colorism.
Do you think that is because people just don't know? Is it ignorance? Or do you think that people are purposely kind of like putting things where they don't belong? Meaning, like, I know you kind of mentioned, like, we'll talk about anti-blackness and it kind of like circumventing the colorism conversation.
Because we all agree, well, most of us in this world, agree that anti-blackness is bad.
Yes.
We all don't agree that colorism is bad yet.
Or exists.
Right. So if there's no and no shade to people, but a lot of us need some kind of outside thing telling you something is real.
Oh yeah.
Telling you something is wrong.
Yeah.
So there's no doctrine, there's no legislation, even though I don't really care about democratic politics, but there's there's nothing saying specifically that dark-skinned black people are harmed and we should do something about it. So if there's nothing telling you that this is a systemic thing that we all should pay attention to, most people are not going to, unfortunately.
There's also a hierarchy of who gets to be human, right? So who's a person, who's a human, who matters, whose voice matters. You know what I'm saying? And so along that hierarchy, those who are more along the margins, those are the people you don't believe. Those are the people who is easier to cut off. Those are the people who you see them say something and make a point. It's like, that can't be true.
Yes.
They must be on something. They must be on. Let me fix this.
You know how many times someone called me crazy because I bring up colorism? It's like, that girl crazy.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've literally seen it. I've literally seen it.
Exactly. And not, oh, she must have a point that I'm not considering because I'm light-skinned or because I'm not a part of that intersection. Rather, it is, that intersection is less than human. They don't matter. Let me speak up and fix this. Yeah. Let me set you straight, because here's what you don't understand. And that's what you'll see oftentimes when those conversations of colorism are happening with a dark-skinned person who is saying, hey, colorism exists. You have the person who, on the hierarchy of marginalization, sits higher up on that hierarchy and says, let me tell you something, dark-skinned person, because I know, because you're less than informed. Now, whatever it is that we think about people who are at whatever marginalization we are dehumanizing within that moment.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of both, to your point. Is it just ignorance or is it on purpose? It's both. It's both, because the hierarchy, the system says that there are people that you can treat less than human. You know what I'm saying? So I am purposely shutting you down, shutting you out, because you're in this category that I don't even see as a person.
Yeah, and I think that that's really, really important to talk about, because the reason why I will never stop talking about colorism is because until I feel, or until I see that there's equity, there is a conversation that's being happening and the reality is more widespread and understood, I'll never stop talking about it, because I feel like it's our job to fill in those gaps, and of course to provide knowledge if people are saying that they don't know. Fine, okay, cool, you don't know. So let's say you don't know and you're listening to this for the first time. I would love to get into the conversation about Megan, because the reason why I was like, I have to speak to Queen and Jay is specifically because everybody has been talking about Megan Thee Stallion. Everyone has been talking about Tory Lanez. Everybody has kind of like been centering hip hop after some recent violence that we've seen. And we're gonna even have a bigger conversation about that later on the show. But for me, I'm looking for the nuance. I'm looking for like this in-between spot, because what I've seen is a couple of things that you've mentioned. From the very beginning, not necessarily believing that what was said was true, right? Even through the guilty verdict for Tory Lanez being found guilty of shooting Megan Thee Stallion, people are like, well, she's a liar and she's this and she's that.
And I don't trust the system anyway.
I'm like, the audacity, the level of like, I hate you. Why do people hate dark-skinned women so much? I do not know. And to your point, because I do see Megan as a brown, dark woman.
She's not dark-skinned.
Okay, and so how do you make that differentiation when traditionally in a space like this, the more successful women have been a la your Beyoncé's or your Cardi B's or your...
I want to say that that's not true, because we have Monica. We have the Nia Longs. Like, that is the acceptable black.
But I'm gonna push back on that really quickly.
You're still able to be like a lighter, a brown skinned person.
Because they're brown. Like they're like, to me, listen, this is how I see it. There's over there, there's over here, and there's in the middle. In the middle, you never know what you're gonna get. Yeah, maybe your nose is a little bit thinner, or maybe you got your nose done, or maybe you got a cup size bigger. You know, maybe you made a little. That we have seen that. Tika Sumpter, a beautiful dark-skinned woman who I think people are more accepting of because she actually has quite European-looking features, despite she has a big nose. She's also very, very, like, her lips are thinner. I had to question myself on why I do certain things, and these are the little things that I've noticed. Why do you say specifically that Megan, she's not dark to you? She's not dark
because I kind of want people assume that light skin is just yellow.
You don't have to touch me.
That's real specific.
No, because I'm noticing that. And it's not a horrible thing, and it's not like something I want to point out.
And also, she's touching me. For full transparency, she's touching me, but because of my upbringing, and because we were not specifically like colorist in that kind of tangible way.
Yeah.
And color didn't matter to me, but my understanding of color is also very basic. So when we would talk about color before, I'd be like, oh, well, this one is dark skin, this one is light skin, because it really didn't matter to me anyway who was dark skin and who was light skin. It's just an easy identifier. Right. And there's a lot of, and Queen's gonna say this, I'm sure, it's a lot of erasure also when you start talking about.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Got it. Let's get into that. Yeah.
Because there's even dark, there's dark-skinned people darker than me. So I think that when we say because someone is not light that they're automatically dark, you erase actual dark-skinned people's experience. So me and Megan are not going to have the same experience. She is also where she is at because she's not the same color as Flo Milli.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And there's a reason
that is
for
very,
that.
Very true.
She still gets entryway because she's the color of the paper bag. She's just not lighter than it. But there's still privilege and being like her. Yeah. So is she getting light skin privilege? Probably not. But she's still lighter.
But what about the people? First of all, this is what I'm talking about, y'all. The nuance. You see what I'm saying? This is exactly what I'm talking about.
And then, sorry, not to cut you off. And then when we talk about the way people use your identity to insult you.
Yeah.
No one's ever said any kind of dark anything to insult Megan. I've
seen it. I've seen that.
Have?
I have. I've seen it on the internet, which I don't think is real life. That. I don't think the internet is necessarily real life, but I saw it because I was specifically not looking for it. I was just looking for the people who really dehumanized Megan. They went a la the gorilla route. They went a la the dark skin route. They did. I saw a lot of it, and I saw a lot of it coming from Black folks.
Yeah, I don't like calling her dark skin because it really erases what actually happens to dark skinned people and how dark skin there can never be anyone darker than Megan. We know that, right? That can't exist. So to me, she has experienced intense amount of misogynoir. I do not think colorism.
It's also to add.
Thank you for that.
The nuances of the way that people talk about Megan. She's also above average height for a quote unquote woman. She's above average height. She's of a certain size. So there's all these different nuances that contribute to the way that people code her, the way that they badmouth her and talk about her. So it's not simply that she's perceived by certain people as dark skinned. She's also perceived as larger than she should be, louder than she should be. It's a lot of different things that go into how much we show that we hate people.
Yeah. I think that's really important.
I agree. She's not light skinned. She's not a light skinned person, but she's definitely not a dark skinned person. And that's why I think we need to stop thinking in a binary. Just because a Black person is not light skinned doesn't mean that they don't benefit from some of the residuals of being lighter than the darkest person in the room.
Oh yeah, I mean, and to your point, because like my brother and I talk about this all the time, because he's lighter than me. I know that I'm not the darkest dark person of all time, but I know that we've had different experiences. So you just articulated what I felt, but I just maybe for myself too, thinking more so in the binary. Why? Because I know that she is not the traditional look of what a lot of people want to see in hip hop or in music at large.
She just doesn't have the biracial look that they're going for. Because we used to have lighter skinned Black women who to just look like Black, if that makes any sense. Yeah. But we're now in a time where they're really trying to just have everyone look biracial. So I think that when people are thinking about colorism in this instance, they're removing the nuance of motherfuckers be mixed race, biracial, or whatever. It's different than a Black light-skinned person.
Yeah. But you know,
but they think that light skin just means passing. That's not. There are Black light-skinned people, but because people, but because because we learn.
Remember us? No.
we learn everything from the media, right? So if the media has even whitewashed light-skinnedness this much that you think light skin only looks like a passing or a white presenting person, then that's why I just like to insert the nuance in it, that there are light skinned people that look like a Monica. Well, light brown, whatever the heck.
No, yeah, you're right. Monica's a really great example.
Yeah, actually. Those people existed in the music industry, right?
Yeah.
But we have to be honest, there weren't a lot of dark skinned women ever, right?
Ever.
Ever.
That's key. Because when we were talking about, when you were talking about this hip hop conversation, and I was thinking about it, if we think about even the older hip hop heads or women from back in the day who were it was a different look, it was a different vibe, it was a different time.
Yeah.
So more clothes, all that stuff because of the time. But if we think about Queen Latifah, Moni Love, Yo-Yo, MC Lyte, all these different all these different presentations of what a woman rapper can be, they were all light-skinned then too. So it's not this like current kind of new issue that we're having. I know a lot of people think when we talk about the colorism with women in hip hop right now, a lot of people are thinking of like the Instagram girls or whatever. But even when everybody was fully dressed wearing Timbs and baggy jeans, they was light-skinned. Yeah. You know, the people who were being pushed forward were light skinned. So
it's true.
Back then as well. It's not new.
It's true. And I think like if you were like how much darker you were, to your point, like where you fall on the spectrum, you gotta be able to do that thing really. Like you gotta be able to sing like Coco.
Missy Elliott is damn near Michael Jackson level talented.
Exactly.
And that's why we know who she is.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's why she was able to crack as a larger dark-skinned woman, because she is the most talented nigga in the industry. You understand?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that that's a really important part of it too, is that like to be dark, you have to be hextra. Like I loved Foxy Brown. You know what I felt, I think as a younger person, now that we're talking about this, I've always felt the lack of whatever it is when you're darker. So like even brother and I, he would be like, oh, or I would be like, oh, this guy is handsome. And everybody else would be like, oh, this guy is handsome. If they were lighter, I'd be like, I disagree. I think the most handsome person is the one who is the darkest available. You know, and it was me just rebelling against
that was me a lot
what
too,
I saw.
yeah.
And he pointed it out to me, like, eventually, like, you know, you're going to choose and it was that. It was like a recognizing it, not being able to articulate it until I could.
Yeah,
but
I was the same way. Yeah.
yes, and it is a thing. You have to be so much better. You have to be able to sing so much better, to do whatever it is so much better. And I think like that's like a really, really important part of the nuance of the conversation. But let me ask you this, because we're talking about Megan. I want to stay on her for a second. One of the things that Megan said that I thought was really profound and kind of like heartbreaking was kind of like expressing a little bit of remorse about surviving the incident because people were so mean. I want to get into the misogynoir part about it, where you made this distinct difference about what she would have experienced, not to just lump everything into the colorism section. Can we talk more about that? Because in a way, it seems as though there are a lot more women who are able to access the hip hop space because it has been kind of like decentralized outside of labels. So now more people have an opportunity. But when you do get to talk to certain artists along the way who are Black, darker skinned women, they still express those same sentiments that like, men out here are still wilding and they're still crazy. They still make it hard for me. They still want to sleep with me. They still want to do all of these things. And yes, colorism, by the way, still exists. And then you have people who are pushing back and they're like, but is it really easier? Is it really easier for light-skinned girls, or is your situation even true? Do you think that there's a misogynoir? Let's put colorism over there for a second. Do you think the misogynoir part is just an integral, foundational part of hip hop? And do you see that going anywhere?
No. So it's a lot of layers, and it's because of all of the intersections, right? And I think that it's really difficult for Black men in particular to understand the intersections. And this is generally anyone with privilege to understand the intersections that don't intersect within themselves. So you're just totally not aware. So that's, that piece, but it's like, why should they change? What is the incentive for these people to not be misogynoir, to not treat Black women this way? There's no reason for them to. And I don't know, it's kind of just like I could talk in circles about this, because it's like, I know the world I want.
Right. It's cute.
I know the liberation I want, but realistically, until people can see outside themselves and understand that you do not liberate people until you liberate the most marginalized person in your group. So if you have to go all the way down to freeing the handicapped trans person, that frees up everything just like that. If you can't think in that way, then you're not going to be helpful to anyone's liberation. Like, I'm very firm on, like, I don't look for the answers from, and it's not to take away from Black men, but I don't think black straight men have my liberation, can make my liberation come true, because they don't even see me.
Yikes.
You know what I mean? Like, also going further, like me, I've said this, I've written this. I do not even look for light-skinned liberationists to do the path, because you're not thinking of me. You're not seeing me, right? So it's like, until people unpacked their privilege and unpacked the things that because I have privilege as well, right? Yeah. But I'm doing the work to unpack the things that I have so I can understand, so that I can be of service to the person that my existence marginalized.
Yeah.
People don't do that.
Woo, not at all.
And I want to add that I think we talk about hip hop a lot and it's such an easy scapegoat.
It is.
An easy scapegoat, because then we don't have to talk about the fact that we live in a patriarchal, misogynist, misogynoirist society, and hip hop just makes it sound delicious. It's the society.
So true.
There's nothing happening in hip hop right now that doesn't happen at work.
Yes.
That doesn't happen in church. That doesn't happen in our civil rights spaces.
Facts.
It is the same
Oh
thing.
my God, that's so
except,
true.
Except in those environments, it's not okay to look at me and say, bitch. But that's what you're thinking.
But you treat me like a bitch.
That's what you're thinking when you come in and say.
That's a fact.
When you come in and say, listen, young lady. Or when you come in and say, listen, you ladies are all saying this, that, or whatever. You just call me a bitch, okay? I know that's what you're thinking. So it's not.
That's why I don't like conscious rap. Just call me a bitch.
Hello, just call me a bitch. And stop. Don't freaking, bitch versus queen. I know what you're thinking. All right. So I don't think it's a hip hop issue. Misogynoir. It's not a hip hop issue. It is the world that we live in. That is how we are treated day to day in society. And I think that hip hop just amplifies and puts a mirror up to what is happening in society. You know what I'm saying? And what people are thinking in society. And I think that, it's dangerous and can be dangerous in the sense that this is what, even as we get older, we all have some entanglement or engagement with hip hop. We do. We're Black people. It's a part of our culture.
Absolutely.
We just are inherently going to be involved in it, depending on, who you are, whatever. Like, we're 2 Black girls from the Bronx. We're just involved. That's just what it is, right? And so I think that's why it feels so, like, raw and present, and that hip hop is the issue and yada, yada, yada. But really, it's happening in every sector and corner of life.
That's a fact.
Hip hop is just putting it on paper. Yeah. That's it.
That's a fact. We had a conversation in LA with a woman by the name of Shelly Bruce, and she is a local activist and community organizer. And she specifically was talking about how dangerous the activism space has become for her and for a lot of the women in this space and femmes who have been targeted.
And that's not new. Black women in the Black Panther Party.
Yes.
Black women in the Nation of Islam when Malcolm was leading in with Farrakhan, not safe. Okay,
Jesus.
Like this is a continuous thing. Black women have been harmed, and it's sadly something we're used to and something we expect. And
if you say it's hip hop, then we don't have to address it in life.
That's true.
We just limit and address these people in hip hop. We limit it and address this class of people. We limit and address the young people. It's this group of Black men that's acting up. It's not a societal issue. And then we don't have to invest in actual liberation. We're investing in fixing the behaviors of this group of people in this culture of hip hop instead of like liberating niggas. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate that because I do think, for me too, I tend, when I think about hip hop, I tend to automatically think about the trickle down effect. Why? Because I grew up in East New York and I know what and how people move when it comes to music. Like, some people, they be able to quote you everything on a song that just came out 5 minutes ago. That's how much people care about the culture. And now we've even moved from back in the day to where, like, now it's the #1 genre on the entire face of the planet. 50% or more of the content is consumed by non-Black folks. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how do you, in your expertise, how do you see what are the steps to take? Not to solve things, but how have you processed it from thinking about it from a societal perspective and how it trickles down to hip hop, and then how you see, for example, Megan getting shot, right? Thank God it was her foot. It could have been something else. You know what I'm saying? So I'm bringing in death. I'm bringing in that aspect of it because is it that we have a conversation that's like, hey, let's start from here and go down? Or do you think that there is value in talking to hip hop artists, for example? Because that, like I was telling y'all before, that was the idea of Stranger Fruit at the beginning, to sit down with hip hop artists and be like, yo, what do you think about what just happened? And like, how do we put you on record right now in terms of like not absolving you from responsibility in what you talk about and how you speak? Is there room to hold folks accountable in the hip hop space, considering the fact that this is way bigger than them? What do you think?
A big question.
I don't think there's an answer to that question.
Okay.
And I think that it's because we're so steeped and soaked in all of these systemic oppressions that we don't even know why we do what we do. We don't even know why we think what we think at this point. Because we're so indoctrinated by these systems that rule our life. As much as you want to admit it or not, they do. Like, the media influences what you think about a person.
It's facts.
So it's not to be a pessimist, but sometimes I just feel like just tear it all down and start over because we're just so soaked and seeped in it that is, you can think that nothing will change. But from like me on a personal level, I just try to cultivate that stuff with myself and the community that I have around me.
That's smart. I get that. I get that.
Because I guess I'm learning that. I'm realizing that stuff, that's what my parents were doing, cultivating this world that probably just exists in this living room, but at least you get it for these couple of hours before you go to school. That's
powerful.
That
is powerful because like how can you even begin to think about, I think a great example is Kodak Black.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all remember, we had a conversation on Kodak Black on the Grapevine back in the day, and it was all about like, there was this one guy who was on there. He loved Kodak Black, okay? He was a Kodak Black fan, and what he described
like an adult person.
An adult person. He loved Kodak Black.
I only know kids who like him, so I'm just like,
nah, he was grown, college, grown, grills, like everything, deep in it, but then also like can be critical of it in a way. Because what he said was, he was just like, listen, I understand. You grow up, people tell you certain things, you absorb it, you start to think to yourself, okay, well, I gotta get a light-skinned girl. That's just what I gotta get. It's there. It's in the hip-hop videos. They done told me this for like a whole decade straight.
In society.
It's in society.
You know what I'm saying?
And the reason why I'm saying hip-hop in particular is because I'm a firm believer that if I'm talking to Mouse, I'm gonna talk to you. And I'm not gonna give you any room for nothing. I'm just not gonna do it, because empathy comes for me with like conflict, compassion, empathy. That's just how I see the world. So I'm gonna tell you what I think. And what he had mentioned, just from his perspective, is that in looking at hip hop, because he was not watching CNN, he was not watching MSNBC or even the Cosby Show. He was
consuming light-skinned daughters, but
how did that add up? That's a whole other conversation. But when y'all hit that, I was thinking that I immediately thought about Denise and Sandra. But to that point, it's kind of like he said. Once he realized, he said he had a moment where he was like, hold up, this doesn't make any sense. Because I believe it was, he described that it was a black woman who challenged him. And when you're across from a black woman and she's saying, I'm holding you accountable for what I learned as a pattern, it was the moment that made him think differently and kind of questioned why he's doing that. So what he acknowledged with Kodak Black, I like him because I see myself in him. And I know that right now he's at a place because he grew up in the same ignorance that I grew up in. And I was just like, okay, I received that, because we were going back and forth for a while. And I was like, I received that. Like a part of this is actually ignorance. But at what point, right? Like at what point do we do what we can? When James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni had that conversation, and Nikki was like, when you come home and you treat me some type of way, right? After doing whatever it is.
Do whatever to you.
You know what I'm saying? That makes me feel some type of way. That is the level of insertion of accountability that I'm speaking about. Because when I look at the system and I'm looking at these conversations, and we have all of these usually cis, het, straight men coming back with this like colorism isn't real. All y'all talking about all of this feminist shit is ruining everything, and all of this kind of stuff. Yes. And I'm thinking to myself, white supremacy and that beast, I don't really fuck with white people like that. You know what even though I say what I say, I don't really fuck with white people like that. My biggest thing is that I've seen change happen on the ground by having conversations. There was even David Duke's nephew and godson that we had on the Grapevine before too. He talked about his interaction with a black woman and how that changed his trajectory of being an extreme racist, right? Those personal interventions or personal moments with people who you thought you hated, who bring that level of enlightenment. That's why I'm asking specifically about like, how do we hold them accountable?
I don't know what level of accountability is required, because as a darker skinned person, I'm harmed by it, so I don't have time or patience
to
wait for motherfuckers to get it.
I get that.
Don't. But I think that, for a lot of people, why colorism conversations stay at preference is because they want to believe that those are their own thoughts, and it is not a system that they've been indoctrinated into.
Wow.
Like these are not even you don't even know why you like that light-skinned girl. You don't even know why that is your preference. You don't understand that you have been anti-blackness, and colorism is so ingrained into you that you want to choose what society says is better. It's not even your choice. And I don't think that people want to admit how much of a sheep they are to media. And when media tells you you're supposed to have what denotes class, what denotes you've moved up in the world is a lighter person. And a lot of times people like to make it so who you sleep in the bed with doesn't denote your politics. It does.
Yeah.
It does. That stuff is not separate.
It is not.
At all. And I really wish people would realize that it's not. Like, if we look at that, I don't know his name, the one that everyone is dragging, canceling, whatever the fuck.
Waymo or whatever. The chef
Yes,
guy?
the chef person.
Oh, the one where they found a whole bunch of like colorist tweets
Chef-
where he was
Chef
like
Wayne, I
being
think
really, really
And
crazy.
it's not by accident that his fiance is an Asian woman.
Yeah.
I liked Asian, because there's dark Asian people. A light Asian, so there's no way that preference and politics are separate, or love or desire.
Absolutely.
Rather. It's separate. It's not. You see it. And I really wish people would try to stop making it like it's some arbitrary choice or decision. No, who you partner with is also a politic.
Yeah, yeah.
I think just to your point about like how do we tackle this?
Yeah.
I think for me, outside of the work that we do to dismantle shit and to achieve, hopefully, when we're long dead, liberation. But
We could watch it from heaven, like
right, but I think a lot of it is like those conversations with people that are in your circle. We are all close to toxic people in some way. I shared what Dr. Donna was talking about. When she was talking about colorism and how the term BIPOC, how she doesn't like how we're lumped in because of colorism and things like that. So I shared that in my stories. And an older cousin of mine, like a grown auntie level cousin, hit me up and she's like, "What is colorism? Like, y'all use all this millennium talk." I was like, first of all,
that term was coined back
then. You're too smart for this. But now this is my responsibility, right? Yeah. She's mine. Right? So it's my job now to engage in this exhausting dialogue about colorism that went on and was exhausting for a while in the Facebook chats. Okay?
Oh,
in the
baby.
Facebook
Oh, my God.
Yes. Yes. So I think we have so many opportunities as people with good sense to talk to the people in our lives and like have those interventions with those who are close to us. And oftentimes, a lot of us choose not to because it's uncomfortable.
Very.
But that's our responsibility when it comes to like those kind of micro things, right? Because I'm not going to spend my time. Of course, we have work where we have a platform and we do things, but I'm not sitting across from a man to try and change his mind. I'm not doing that on a micro level. I'll do it with my cousin, because that's my responsibility. And when he's out in the street, the great black saying of, whose cousin is that?
Whose uncle
is that? Whose man is
Come
this?
get your auntie. Right.
That's because we have a community code. And whoever's in your community, that's yours. That's your responsibility. Yeah. And if they're out here wilding, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's where this kind of micro talking one-on-one, talking to people who are in your community. There's people who I went to college with who they're a part of my community. I've known you since I was 17 and you're ignorant and we're too old for this now. And so as a part of my community, I'm going to have this conversation with you. So I think that's how we do these things on a micro level. Like talk to the people who belong to you because they're there and you're avoiding them just because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. Talk to your parents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On a micro level, that's what I think we need to do. On a macro level, I think we should be fighting towards liberation. So I'm not having these kinds of one-on-ones like, you treat women bad. I'm not doing that. I don't want to be on that panel. But I want to, do the work that like awakens maybe a lot of people at one time. You know what I'm saying? Or like there's somebody who's going to listen to this conversation and not fully get it until they listen to the next podcast on colorism. And then it'll be like, oh, that's what they were saying. Like this is what they was talking about. It's an ongoing process.
100%.
To, liberation.